I'm Sarah Beplin. I have been teaching sewing, pattern making, fitting, anything to do with garment construction for about 30 years. I've also written a book about garment fitting, The Complete Photo Guide to Perfect Fitting, which is a top-selling book. And I really wrote it with the intention that it would help you, anybody who's interested in fitting garments, get a better fit. Part of fitting your garments is choosing pattern sizes. And what we're going to be talking about today is choosing a sleeve pattern size. In order to choose a sleeve pattern size, you need to have an idea of two different measurements. One is your bicep. So you want to take a measurement around your arm here. It's a little bit below the underarm. Now, if your bicep is really full further down, take the bicep measurement there. But for lots of us, it's right about in here. Just put your tape measure right around there and see what it reads. And then what I do is slide my thumb so it comfortably barely touches the underarm and put my arm here. And then I'm going to measure from that point up to the hinge of the shoulder, or maybe a little bit higher. So for me, I place my armholes a little bit higher, so I would go a little bit higher than that. So that's the cap height that you need. And we'll having those two measurements, I'll give you an example. We'll take a look at a pattern and assess what pattern size we would be using. I'm using this pattern. It happened to just be one I have had in my collection, and you can see that we have a 3/4 sleeve here. Here we have a 3/4 length sleeve, and where we're going to be concentrating is here in the bicep and cap height area. This pattern gives you a bicep measurement, and it's taken a little bit lower than the underarm area where I described I usually take it, but your bicep might be, the full part of your bicep might be at this level, in which case this would be really good. So let's just say that your bicep was 12.5 inches. Then what you need to do is add 2 inches of ease. So that would be 12, 13, 14.5 inches. And that's in my experience, the minimum amount of wearing ease, extra room in your sleeve from side to side that you're going to need. So the size 14 sleeve is really a pretty good choice. It might be a little bit big, and you could take it down in size here on either side, say 1/8 of an inch, and take out 1/4 of an inch if you wanted to, or you could leave it. Remember, what we're trying to do is find a good starting place. We're not expecting this sleeve to fit exactly. We just want to have an educated decision about what size to start with. The second measurement is the cap height. And that goes from this underarm level, because that's where we measured it from. Here's my seam allowance from the 14 size, the smallest size down. And I've drawn a line across there. These are just parallel to each other. And then I'm going to measure down from the 14 cut line to the 5/8 of an inch. Assuming that we have a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on our pattern, whatever it is, that's what you measure down to. And I measure up, and I see that the cap height that they are providing is 4 7/8. And for me, I have much closer to a 6-inch cap height. Generally, I'll take the cap height, say it's 5, 5 1/4. You'll want to add about 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, a little bit of ease. And so let's just assume that we had a 5 1/2 inch cap height, which would come to here. And that's including that 1/2 inch ease or so. So this is just a made up example. So then this would be a seam line, and then that's going to blend down into here to the seam line, because we need that amount of the cap height, 5 1/2, or whatever your measurement is. So what I'm going to do is here in the underarm, since the bicep is good at this point, I'm going to measure down from my cut line with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and do that on both sides, just so that I can preserve that part of the pattern. And then I'm going to draw from here. This is seam line. This is seam line. We're going to connect these. And in the front, I'm going to probably give myself a little bit more roundness here, which will help with a forward shoulder or accommodate a shoulder ball, even if you don't have a really pronounced forward shoulder. And so I'm going to draw from here, just play around with my ruler. And I want to come down into this area. I think I'll start at about like this, and then flip my ruler over and get that contiguous line coming up this way. There we go. This is seam line. If it helps you, write it down so you remember what it is. Here at the underarm, I always want to make sure I have a little bit of a flat area for the sleeve to come out from under the arm. So I'm actually going to flatten that out a little bit before I come up here. And then I'm going to bring this over here. So if it helps you to lightly sketch it in first, you can do that. Or you can be like me and really just use your ruler. And so we're going to come over. I think I'll get this back on grain. I really like to draft with my patterns on grain line on the grid. It helps me visualize. And so we'll bring this over a little bit. And you can see I'm pretty liberal with this because I know for me with a forward shoulder, it will help. And in fact, for most women, it's helpful to have a little bit of extra right up in this area on the front of the sleeve. And this is a starting point. So once I have cut it out and pulled it up onto my arm, fitting the sleeve onto the actual arm, I can get an idea of whether I have guessed anywhere near right, and then I can start to fine tune my fit. So here I will add my cut line and then draw it in. You know, my hand's covering what I'm drawing, but there's no other way. So what I'm doing is just measuring out my 5/8 of an inch. Now, if your pattern has a different seam allowance, of course, you'll use what that is, but I like 5/8, partly out of habit. And just on around. And then I can put my ruler down on this cut line. I often draft this underarm with what I refer to as the chin of the ruler, right on that pattern edge. And then come up and around. You can see I flip my ruler around a lot. After you've drafted patterns or done a lot of pattern work associated with your fitting, this ruler, the fashion design ruler, the styling design ruler, it just becomes like an extension of your hands. And that's what you want. Your hands instinctively will start to know where to put that ruler down. But don't worry, if it doesn't feel that way in the beginning, you'll get there. I drew in initially my seam line, and then I measured out with a ruler to get my cut line. So I could cut along the cut line here. This was the pattern's cut line, so I would cut along it all the way down here and here. And that would be the pattern I would start with to make my first mock-up. And generally what I would do is I would sew the underarm of the sleeve to the bodice, from the underarm seam of the sleeve, the side seam of the bodice, out about 1.5 inches and about 1.5 inches in the back. So the sleeve is attached just at this underarm area. And then I would put the bodice on, getting my arm down into that sleeve. That leaves this area of the sleeve for me to be turning under my 5/8 or whatever my seam allowance is and start to actually do some fitting. I'll be doing future videos about how to fit the sleeve and how to assess once I get a sleeve that fits my arm nicely, then how am I going to get that sleeve into the armhole? That's always a big issue because often the sleeve cap circumference, so from here up and around to here, exceeds what the armhole opening is. I'll be doing lots more videos about that and getting into the nitty-gritty of it. I hope this has been helpful, give you some good information so that you know that first mock-up that you make of your sleeve is at least going to go around your arm. It'll be about the right cap height. If this has been helpful to you, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll be doing lots more videos, and if you have an idea of something you'd like me to teach, feel free to let me know. Thanks so much.